Chapter 3 of the Covenant of Primus is the last chapter about the Primes, and is very long and important. This is the story of how Megatronus became the Fallen. This part is called the War of the Primes. AlphaTrion says the period after they defeated Unicron lasted a long time, and he's only summarizing the main events. He admits that after they were victorious with their common goal, things started to fall apart. They celebrated, but deep inside, they felt touched by Unicron's darkness. No one talked about it and kept it to themselves, which was likely their biggest mistake. In the day, they worked on developing the world, but in their alone time at night, the negative thoughts and feelings plagued them when they had no distractions. They felt worry and anxiety, felt worse about their mistakes, and resentful about anything the others said or did to them. AlphaTrion finds that he can't really blame Unicron for the darkness because no one went to each other to work through it. First, it was not so bad. Everyone formed groups based on their common interests. The group of the early Primes focused on logic and order, built vehicles like starships, but they grew full of themselves and started thinking that they knew what was best, that others weren't doing something right or that they should be doing something else. Maximo liked to walk around and pass information to everyone, but his group was with Megatronus and Amalgamus. The third group were the creative ones who did not like rules either or anything political. Micronus, Onyx, Solus, and Nexus. They saw everyone else as too unimaginative. The last, 13, Alchemist, and Quintus did not belong anywhere but were roughly welcomed by everyone. Liege Maximo was also a charming fellow who could support and get friendly with anyone, so that is why he could pass on the news. But Megatronus never stopped adoring Solus for trusting him with the Requiem Blaster and the first set of armor. Her kindness was the greatest thing he had ever been given, so in this tense time, he still fell in love with her. He visited her, and if she was around, he would be less rude to other bots. Solus also enjoyed how nice he was being to her when he usually is crude. Megatronus even went out of his way to bring her neat things he found while working on an energon refinery. They would have discussions about the weird devices, rest together, leaning into each other. Yes, the L word is used. The early Prime group doesn't understand such tender feelings and thinks they are too fanciful, but some Primes like 13, Onyx, and Micronus were shipping it. Most Primes still had friendships at this time, and Solus was everyone's friend because she was just so accepting and nice, building things constantly for the others for free. This of course made Megatronus super jealous, but he tolerated the presence of everyone else. Meanwhile, some assholes are developing. The stuck-up early Primes are working on sophisticated projects. Vector mapped the stars and analyzed planets, and Prima worked on the technology for the Sigma project. But Prima came up with a dangerous belief during his boredom that was going to destroy them all. He proposed that the early Primes were the closest to goodness in Primus, so lawful good, while the later Primes, except for 13, were closest to chaos in Unicron, chaotic evil. But Prima is particularly against Liege Maximo and Megatronus, thinking of them as inferior, selfish, and evil. Vector agreed with him, and AlphaTrion felt troubled but unfortunately kept silent to not be excluded from the group. At meetings, tension was only increasing as Prima and Vector tried to take command and create a hierarchy. The opposition to their rule was Megatronus and Maximo naturally, supported by Quintus, Amalgamus, and 13 at times. First they stood for their freedom, but developed into rebellious behavior. Scrap hits the fan blades when Maximo discovers a chart Prima had made describing how he and Megatronus are chaotic evil. He tells Megatronus, who does the confrontation for him. Megatronus is fuming mad and bursts into the little laboratory of sorts, even breaking the door. Prima demands to know the meaning of this, and Megatronus punches him in the face and yells at him sarcastically that he'll basically show him what a monster is. The two of them tussle, smashing things and destroying the room. AlphaTrion grabs his relics and scurries away while Vector gets tackled, but Vector teleports like an Enderman to AlphaTrion's side, and AlphaTrion almost starts laughing because Prima and Megatronus are stepping and sliding on balls, the solar system model they knocked over. However, it is no longer funny when Prima freaking pulls out the Star Saber on Megatronus. He says that his violent reaction only proves his point that Megatronus is evil. Megatronus tells him to shove his sword where the sun don't shine. He pushes the sword aside and counters that Prima hating the others isn't something a good bot would do. Prima asks why he would be upset about the chart when Megatronus used to claim he was burdened by being the most like Unicron. So why is that offending him? Megatronus then growls that all those early Primes should be thankful that Megatronus took that burden, that the early Primes don't have to struggle with being naturally darker, that they owe him for that. Prima and Megatronus glare at each other with hatred, and Megatronus leaves claiming that Prima isn't useful. Megatronus builds things, Vector studies things, AlphaTrion records things. What good does Prima even do for them? Unfortunately, this all drives AlphaTrion to Prima's side, and now he hated Megatronus too. Maximo stopped being friendly to everyone the day Solus refused to make something for him. He asked for some armor, but she said there was no point because they're not in a war. She had never refused anyone before, so I imagine he took it personally. He explains that he and Quintus are so bored that they started making little robotic creatures for entertainment. He brings Solus a 4-legged one. It's cute and doesn't do much, but it looks at you if you talk. Maximo hopes that one day they can create living creatures, presumably with Quintus's life-giving relic. Alchemist asks where the farm is, but Maximo doesn't want anyone to see it yet. He lets Onyx hold the animal, but it doesn't like him. Solus then judges how thick the armor is in the blueprints he made. Maximo claims that they might make bigger animals, so it's just in case. Later, Maximo and Quintus come back with a really cute, harmless creature and gifts it to Solus. It has no teeth, makes little beeping noises, and learns to quickly obey commands. This finally sways her into making the armor. One day, Alphatron is looking for Prima and he can't find him anywhere. He doesn't see anyone at the Energon refinery either. He thinks about the farm and he looks around for it. Eventually, he finds footprints belonging to Maximo and Quintus. Then he does find the farm. There are electric fences and small robotic animals bumbling around. Alphatron follows the footprints toward the sheds, where he hears Prima commanding Maximo and Quintus to shut down the farm. Prima thinks they are planning to create monstrosities, so he says either they end it or he will. Quintus is emotionally upset that isn't different from what the early Primes do, and that Prima doesn't have the right to act like their leader. Maximo tells Prima to be reasonable, that no one's been hurt. Prima accuses them of plotting an evil scheme and tells them that they have 3 days to recycle everything. Prima runs into Alphatrion and assumes he's on his side. As Alphatrion starts leaving with Prima, Maximo quietly jokes to Quintus that at least Prima didn't see the back pen. They did not know Alphatrion was nearby, so he sneaks off to see what they were talking about. The back pen has large bots inside, and pieces of other bots which they had torn up. Alphatrion makes eye contact with one and becomes scared by the intelligence in its gaze. He hurries away, but hears Maximo talking in the shed again. He praises Quintus for his modifications, but he talks about dangerous cave pits with smart, vicious creatures. He says they can't do anything about them until they have armor. Then Megatronus' voice sounds out. He says he'll bring him more generator packs, and Maximo calls him a good friend for doing that. Megatronus leaves and Alphatron hides. He hears Quintus and Maximo giggle, and possibly the words, "They'll never know what hit them." News about the farm situation spread to all the Primes, and opinions were divided. 13 and Amalgamus want them to form a debate, because secret projects are bad, but so is Primus' behavior. No one listens. Solus is surprisingly very against the creatures, and it dismays Maximo. He claims it isn't fair that she gets to make anything she wants, and they can't. Alphatrion watches them debate, when Solus asks about what they are for, and says that secrets are only dividing them. Maximo argues that he did tell them, and protests that she loves her little pet. She does, and feels guilty, and Maximo pleads a little, before she promises the armor to be done tomorrow. Solus doesn't know what to think, but Alphatron says they will hold a vote because 13 demanded one. There is one more day before Prima will destroy the farm. So far, Alphatron kept the info about the back pen to himself. Everyone arrives and they must cast rocks, red to keep the farm, grey to destroy it. Alphatron wants an anonymous vote, but Prima refused it, so that they could all see who their enemies were. Maximo and Megatronus feel the same. They cast red rocks to keep the farm. Alphatron, Prima, Vector, Alchemist, Micronus, and Nexus vote against the farm. Onyx, 13, Amalgamus, and Quintus vote for it. The vote is even and up to Solus. Solus swears at Prima's face, basically telling him to rot in hell, but votes on his side anyway. She walks away and covers her face, but her vote hurt Megatronus, and he glares at her. So the farm is to be destroyed. After the vote, Maximo, Quintus, and Megatronus decide to sneak away some of their best creatures and destroy the others. Maximo asks Megatronus to get the armor from Solus, while he and Quintus destroy the animals. Later, Onyx, 13, and Micronus are talking at Onyx's nest. In the distance, they hear a commotion at Solus' place, and they rush over. Alphatron arrives with everyone else only after he hears Onyx howling, and that is where they find Solus dead on the floor, her spark chamber and a large part of her torso shot away. Her energon and some golden bodily fluid pool under her, and her face is frozen in amazement, as though about to say something. The shot wound is obvious, but no one knows why Megatronus would ever do this to Solus. We can probably assume it was Onyx's screaming that brought everyone onto the scene. Alphatron notices that Maximo first looks horrified, then gleeful, before making his expression like everyone else's. Micronus freaks out and goes to the body, begging her not to be dead. 13 comforts him and tries to tell him she has returned to the Allspark. Suddenly, Onyx jumps onto Maximo trying to rip out his throat. Maximo screeches and Vector saves him by teleporting Onyx and pinning him to the wall with a warp force. Maximo is terrified and outraged, claims that Onyx tried to kill him, but Prima doesn't give a damn and is cold to him. Then something begins to happen under Solas's body. The metal ground begins to liquefy and melt underneath her as it reacts to her bodily fluids. Everyone panics and doesn't know what to do, but they only watch her vanish into the ground as she too melts. But it is beautiful as well, bright blue, white, and gold, and they realize her body is melting straight down to the spark chamber of Primus himself. The next focus is on finding Megatronus. Vector concentrates and uses his universal powers to sense where he is. He knows Megatronus has fled far, but they can catch him. Many demanded to come with him, but 13 cries out that they can't go lynch Megatronus without the full truth of what happened. Vector teleports Prima, Micronus, 13, and Nexus to Megatronus' location, and the rest of the Primes watch Onyx exhaust himself. Quintus tries to say that they don't really know what happened, but Maximo turns on Megatronus and says he was temperamental and like a bomb waiting to go off. Amalgamus defends him and says it's not true, he never hurt any of his friends. Maximo spins a story that the armor was for Megatronus and the beast he wanted, that Megatronus kept pushing her for the armor, and now he pushed too far. That Megatronus was plotting things at the farm that no one knew about. Alphatron says he can't figure out Maximo, and thought he was friends with Megatronus. Maximo claims he was, that he took all the responsibility, that Prima would have freaked out if he knew Megatronus was behind the farm. Now the readers will have trouble knowing what the truth is, but Quintus softly confirms Maximo's story. He says that they were all in on the project for fun, but Megatronus took it too far. Vector's group find Megatronus alone, wearing the armor and bearing the Requiem blaster. 13 asks for his story before the others make a move, and Megatronus gives it. He says he asked for the armor she was making for Maximo and learned that she had lied and finished it weeks ago. He sighs that he learned her pet was actually a spy Maximo made with a video camera. Megatronus accidentally found the recordings, and he heard what everyone said about him in his absence, that even Solus said he was just Maximo's fool. Her words had wounded him, bothering him when he came to see her. He sees the completed armor, and she says that she changed her mind and won't give it to Maximo. Megatronus knows they need it for the creatures, and he feels completely betrayed, that Solus has always been on the side of the early Primes, and was only pretending to be nice to him to keep him under control. Then Solus asks for Megatronus to give back the Requiem blaster. This is incredibly devastating to him because her original trust in giving it to him is what made him love her. It made him happy that someone didn't think he was evil, but then Megatronus feels that she never actually loved him and it had all been deceit. Angry, he goes to take the armor anyway. She pulls out a magnetic device and tries to stop him, but he shoves her away and picks up the armor. After he shoved Solus, however, her pet jumps at his face and he reflexively shoots it in self-defense. Solus freaks out because he basically shot her dog, so she charges to attack him with her hammer. Megatronus then reflexively shoots her, barely thinking, just feeling that she hates him. Megatronus puts away his sword and tries to tell them her last words, which baffle him. Instead, he pulls out the animal's head and shows them what it recorded. Her last words were, "I'm so sorry, Megatronus. I love..." Prima asks him if what he is saying is that it was a mistake. Nexus comes up to Megatronus with handcuffs to take him away, but Megatronus jumps back, ready to fight. 13 tries to de-escalate the situation, but Micronus shrieks that Megatronus won't get away with this, that he never could control his temper. Megatronus doesn't deny it, but he refuses to be judged by Prima, who never felt kindness to any living being before. 13 calms Megatronus and convinces him to come back with them, not handcuffed. So Megatronus comes back with them and throws the animal head at Maximo. Megatronus accuses Maximo of letting him find the recordings. Maximo claims he probably dropped them accidentally and that they should focus on Megatronus' pit creatures instead. They release Onyx, then they visit the farm. Maximo shows them the cave with pits and sides and claims that the dangerous creatures are in there. Megatronus growls that he didn't make them, that Maximo and Quintus did. They look into a pit and see torn apart dummies resembling Prima, Vector, Alphatron, Alchemist, Onyx, and Nexus. The target range. Everyone looks at Megatronus, but he turns on Maximo and yells that he had never seen this before, that Maximo set him up. Quintus cries out that he had no part in this, and Megatronus raises his gun. Of course, Maximo shouts that Megatronus is out of control, but the noise alerts some of the monsters. 3 robotic animals crawl out of a pit and come toward them. Maximo shoves Megatronus into Vector and Nexus and tries to make a run for it, and Quintus fails to grab him. Amalgamus catches him just as Prima, Vector, Onyx, and Nexus fall into one of the pits. All the fighting and bloodshed suddenly pulls everyone into a maddened state. They are fighting for their lives against the creatures, but all those negative emotions that had been inside them burst free. They attack anything that moves, even each other and former allies. Alphatron grabs a metal bar and bashes anything close to him, blinded with the others by a haze of violence. Only 13 is unaffected, vainly trying to stop the fighting, but no one listens to him. Alphatron wakes up, battered and without much memory of what had happened. 13 is over him with an electrical revival device. He, the pure thing he is, had to run to get medical supplies. Alphatron looks around and sees that all the animals are dead, and everyone is lying on the floor wounded. However, Maximo's mutilated body lies on the floor, torn to pieces with a shot wound in his head from the Requiem blaster. No one remembers what happened, but more than one is to blame for killing him. Onyx is fatally injured and dying. He cannot be saved. They carry him back and build Solus a nice tomb in her memory. They do not give Maximo a nice tomb and instead make a nameless tomb that will get built over in the future. Prima has taken the Requiem blaster, and they celebrate Solus's life with fireworks and guns. They sit around a fire and tell stories about her throughout the night, but Megatronus is too broken to say anything. He stares at the flames in silence. In the morning, he stands up and says that he's leaving. He's still wearing the armor she made. He touches it and says that there are other worlds and peoples out there. He is going to use his strength to help them. He is the Fallen, killer of his friends, but Solus saw good in him, so he's going to learn to become a hero. He asks Vector to teleport him somewhere far away, but Prima surprisingly shows kindness. He offers Megatronus the spaceship they had made and hands him the key, saying, "Until we meet again." Megatronus says that they probably won't, but 13 calls out that they will be waiting for him. With a salute, he leaves in the ship and vanishes into space. The others are no longer angry, but they don't know what their purpose is now. Onyx is definitely going to die, so heartbroken and injured. He has his mask out, Morn Song, which can see the realm of the dead. Micronus asks what he can see, but Onyx cannot see Solus or Maximus sparks, only the Allspark. Everyone gathers around him, wondering what they shall do now. They decide the age of the Primes is over and that they will create a new Cybertronian race based on all 13 of them, but with more variation, using Onyx's relics to see alien races. The new life would rise from the well of Primes' approval, but they will live free lives not under the authority of the Primes. They will watch and only step in when necessary. And so 13 proposes a plan. Onyx will enter the well, surviving close to the Allspark and by the energy of Primus. He will design the future Cybertronians. Alphatron will stay, recording history. Vector will watch over space-time, checking for anything that might wake Unicron. Everyone else is free to do as they like. 13 will die to be reborn as one of the new Cybertronians and experience their life. He will not know his prime powers, but if they ever need him to be a prime again, they just have to wake him. This will be so. Alchemist decides to continue his study. Quintus will travel through space and create new alien friends for the Cybertronians. Prima will help Alphatron keep the peace, and he will hide the Requiem blaster. Amalgamus will stay and share his T-Cog pattern to Onyx to put into each Cybertronian. Nexus is going to hide their most dangerous artifacts in space, then come back. After all, Vector, Amalgamus, and Nexus still want to finish their supercomputer. 13 then turns to Alphatron and asks that his true name be removed from the Covenant of Primus, in case anyone discovered it and used it to find him. So Alphatron replaces his name with 13. He worries that 13 might not return after death, but 13 thinks fate will be kind. Micronus decides to go into the well of Onyx and climbs onto his neck. 13 picks up Onyx, tells him that the era of the Primes is over, but not their brotherhood. For all are one. Light comes out and gently carries him down, and they all hear the low voice of Primus welcoming them home. That was quite the long chapter, like a story in itself. The story of the Primes is not well known by Cybertronians, and Megatronus is demonized in the retelling of it. But the truth was that he was complicated and not truly evil. The one who should have been called the Fallen was the conniving, lying Liege Maximo. Quintus was innocent and did not mean harm to anyone. Megatronus sought to become a better person, although he was predisposed to darkness. And all the characters are emotional and can be empathized with. And then Robots in Disguise ruined it and made him a flat villain, the most unforgivable crime of the show in my eyes. You're now wondering, so where are the other Primes now? A couple of primes are mentioned in the next chapter. Quintus's fate is later revealed, and Nexus Prime returns in the novel Exiles.